Hey, everybody, welcome to the show and another exciting week here at Eggs. This week we have a exciting guest. His name's Frank Cottle. He's a timeless futurist with primary expertise on the future of work, which for anybody who listens to this show, know that's kind of a hot topic around here. He's founder and CEO of Alliance Virtual Offices. He's a really experienced business leader and an engaging speaker who will appeal to listeners of all ages and backgrounds, from Gen Z to boomers all over the globe. From his home and sometimes his co-working center in Southern California, Frank will offer enlightening insights and on a huge range of topics, including investment banking, finance, commercial real estate, workplace technology, and most importantly, the future of work and co-working. He's also a bit of a pro in windsurfing and cycling and some other fun things, so maybe we'll get into that a little bit. Anyway, he's here with us. He's happy to share his visionary insights and experiences to help listeners explore fresh perspectives on business, lifestyle, and new ways of working. Everyone, welcome to the show, our guest, Frank Cottle.
Hey, Frank, how's it going?
Hey, just fine. Thank you very much for allowing me to address your audience.
No, thank you for making the time to come on. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So, I'm sure you get this on every interview you do, but give us a little bit of backstory. I heard you kind of got out of college and went into commercial diving and sailing yachts and fun stuff like that.
Yeah, I was lucky when I started my career. I started really working my way through college as a commercial diver and did some interesting work as a contractor to one of our U.S. federal agencies during the Vietnam War era.
Okay.
So I think they just call that interesting work, and we leave it at that.
You could tell us, but you'd have to.
No. We'd have to kidnap you, and that's actually more fun. And then when I got married in the very early 70s, in 1971, my wife and I decided that wasn't a good career choice. And so I started racing yachts, which seemed to work out well with my love of the ocean. I've lived on the ocean all my life, and so it was a natural thing for me to do.
Do you follow the America's Cup at all?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I worked with Bill Ficker on the Intrepid series, and also was on the Stars and Stripes team.
So
running the business manager for the America's Cup.
Okay, do you know Dallas Wilcott?
No, I don't.
He does the carbon fiber work on the 2017 one that flipped.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that was before my era. I come from the old 12-meter era.
Oh, okay. I don't go for. I got in. My buddy, he's a friend from Anacortes, Washington, and he got into doing carbon fiber work and ended up working on the World's Cup and working for Oracle and that back race. He did most of the carbon fiber work on that, which is really cool.
I worked closely with Fiberspar for a while, and I held the record in windsurfing for the most booms broken of on the circuit. So I would hold it until it snapped, so that was fun. At least it was a fun record to have. It wasn't fun to break the booms at high speed.
Yeah. Did you get up to Hood River very often?
Not very often. I honestly don't like the gorge.
Okay.
The sailing's great and the water's great, but I feel I'm an ocean guy. So I feel really constrained going wall to wall, as they call it, back and forth across the river. I want to keep going,
and just
I don't want to have to turn because I see the other bank coming at me so fast. So I'm more of a Mexico, Hawaii guy.
Nice.
Nothing wrong with that. It's a little warmer down that way too.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Okay,
so cool. So to continue on, so eventually you get into yachting, you start doing all this stuff.
Get into yachting, and we built there were a bunch of us. We worked and built quite a large yacht brokerage at the same time, and as we were sailing, and a bunch of young guys. We had a wonderful, I'll call him not partner or owner, but patron, a fellow behind the company that just only wanted to do things perfect and right. And money didn't matter because he was exceedingly wealthy, and it was all about the quality and the way we represented things. So it was a fabulous environment to mature in as a businessman because of the focus. And the other thing that was cool is, you're hanging out with some pretty interesting people in the yachting world. Very, very successful generally. You mentioned Oracle a minute ago. Well, when you're hanging out with guys like Ellison, you learn a lot. You get to see a lot of successes, and you also see a lot of failures. And the failures usually are lifestyle failures, not business failures, but lifestyle failures. You know, they're 65 years old. They're on their second trophy wife. Their kids hate them, and they're going to take the cruise of a lifetime that they dreamed of and worked so hard of for the last 50 years. But they just aren't. It's like a thing.
Yeah.
They didn't balance their life, and for me, that balance is what's always been the most important.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a really key point actually to touch on, because I think that's one of the bigger struggles everybody has. You know, they all hear work-life balance, but I think generally what they think is they need more time off. It's not as much about really finding and striking that perfect balance, you know, between the amount of time you spend working and building your life, so that later in life you can be sustained.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of your life as really as a finely woven cloth. And the differences in time really are like the threads. They touch each other. So it's not like I need to work real hard and then I'm going to take time off. No, I need to every day work hard and every day take time off and every day have some time for my family, and every day be some time to be a good student and to learn these things. And it's a daily thing. It's not a sections of your life thing. At least to me, that's the way I look at it.
Small things add up over time. 2 hours of study each day turns into a lot of time over the year.
Yes, it does.
So you mentioned, you know, being around the, you know, Oracle and those kind of people, you learned a lot, but didn't you kind of come up from a business family? Wasn't your dad pretty?
Yeah, our family, we're a family steeped in farming and ranching going back, gosh, umpteen generations before statehood here in California. My father was primarily in the food production and distribution end of that. We still had some farms and ranches when he was around. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial family with a serial entrepreneur dad who had built a number of companies quite successfully. And so when it came time for me to create a career, the concept of working for someone else instead of with someone else or with a team or on my own, which I've always kind of been sort of a lone wolf. I couldn't understand it. I always felt that college education, at least that I had, was always teaching you to go to work for IBM or something.
Yeah.
And that just didn't work for me. For me, college was a time when you have to learn how to make decisions. And if you can do that one thing, learn how to make decisions well, then your time spent in school was well worthwhile.
Now, you shared a story on another podcast that I checked out yesterday about your dad and commodities and ship it. Can you talk about
that? Yeah, we're in the food production distribution business, and we had cold storage facilities in Los Angeles, amongst other things. And my dad would speculate in the commodities market primarily with fresh foods or frozen foods, fryers, roasters, pork bellies, things of that nature. And whenever he would go one way in the market, he'd buy something short. Well, then if it turned long, he would just say, ship it. And it always threw people off. They'd say, wait a second, we're talking like 10 carloads of pork bellies. Carloads being 160,000 pound freezer container in a train car. And he'd say, yeah. So, and then he'd just sit on it until the market turned again. And
then he'd sell it himself.
Then he'd sell it himself, right? And we were fortunate in that we had large institutional customers for the company, the school systems, prison systems, U.S. Army, big tour cruise lines, and things of that nature.
Oh, wow.
So the volume, it was a low margin but high volume business.
There you go.
And we worked in quarter of a cent, half cent a pound increments for margin sometimes.
Oh, wow.
But in the millions of pounds. So it worked.
Yeah, so it works out.
Yeah. It worked out okay.
Cool. Well, so let's get back to your story a little bit and just talk about the move from yachting and all this fun entrepreneurial stuff that you were doing and all the lessons you learned, and kind of you began to transition into this world of executive offices and things like that. Can you just talk about kind of that move? Because they don't seem super related outside of just being entrepreneurial.
Well, actually, when I was in the yachting business, I'm here from Newport Beach, and a lot of people in Newport Beach at the time, a lot of my clients were in residential and commercial real estate development. And I looked at that business, and we started actually in the mid 70s in residential apartment buildings. Buying apartments, refurbishing the complexes, and then sitting on them and flipping them really, and spinning up into larger projects and larger projects. And I found, honestly, that I didn't like that business. It was too management intensive on little things. It was really kind of painful. Even though we were fairly large and had a management company and everything, I wasn't out necessarily fixing toilets or anything like that, but it was a pretty good business. And I just decided to move over to the commercial side as an investment, and then got intrigued with the concepts of shared workspace, executive suites, land banking, things of that nature, and decided that I had sailed and hung out on the yachting scene long enough, and that it was time for me, as my dad said, it was time for me to put my long pants on. Which was kind of interesting considering at the time we had the largest yacht brokerage in the world. So that was pretty long pants business.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that seems like pretty long pants to me.
But for him, it was nope. You're still playing on boats.
Right.
So we started in call it 1980 with a land banking theory of buying property, buying a piece of dirt on the edge of a large commercial development with additional entitlement. Meaning, if we planned to put up a 50,000 foot building, we had the right with the land to build 500,000 feet.
Wow.
And the key to that kind of a theory is always, well, how do you afford to buy the land, hold on to it for the 6 or 8 or 10 years that it takes for the location to mature to where it's time to build a larger building on it. And we discovered these funny little things called executive suites, which back in the late 70s, early 80s were brand new. And we determined that we could generate the most amount of revenue with the smallest amount of bricks and mortar to sit on the biggest piece of land with the greatest entitlement that we could hold for 10 years by building buildings that had executive suites. We're focused on executive suites.
Okay.
So between 1980 and 1990, we built a portfolio across California, Arizona, and Texas of those kind of buildings.
So didn't you do something like you would build one every 110 days? And then you flip it, and you did that for 10 years?
Yes, for 10 years we did it, but we didn't flip the buildings real quick. We held on to the buildings as long as possible and really sold the portfolio at the end of the 10-year period.
Okay.
We were going through quite a development phase, and it was quite interesting. And it was also quite exhausting, because we built across California, Arizona, and Texas. So there's a lot of moving parts there.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's pretty cool though. And I mean, based on the time frame you're talking about, I think that was pretty innovative thing to be doing. It's becoming more and more commonplace, this idea of co-working and renting an executive suite and things like that. But I mean, it really seems like you're on the cutting edge of that kind of.
Actually, at times the bleeding edge, I think.
Yeah.
The cutting edge is always a little bit bloody, and we learned a lot. We made some terrible mistakes in our first 4 or 5 years. We way overdeveloped the properties, particularly in terms of technology. I'm looking at your guys' video images, and I'll ask you, where were you in 1980?
Right.
But
bouncing baby boy in 1980.
In 1980, PCs didn't exist. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
And in our centers, we put together in the first year a joint venture with Bell Labs to basically have the first business facility that simultaneously transmitted both voice and data over 4-pair twisted cable. We built a custom, what was called then a MUX box, which was what you'd call today a router, that joined voice and data, and we put in big digital switches and big mini computers, and we put touchscreen terminals on every desk that was interconnected with the central service core. So things that were way beyond people's understanding of even how to use.
Yeah.
We were the first commercial installation of ISDN in a joint venture with GTE, their smart park concepts. So we've always pushed technology as part of our business model, and sometimes way too far in advance, where we had to explain to everyone, hey, look, this is how it really works. I mean, people were using telexes back then. and here we had touchscreen technologies and
that's it.
Data.
I mean, it really is, how amazing things are. I mean, nowadays when you're looking for co-working space, like great Wi-Fi is about all anybody will promise you. But from just the the little laptop computer, like in our case, we're running multiple cameras, multiple audio setups. We're running all this stuff off of just a couple little machines. We've got 10 times the technology packed into this laptop. Yet you guys were doing this, 30 years ago.
40 years ago,
40 years ago.
40 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. I turned 39 next month. So yeah.
Yeah. So you were just a twinkle in your parents' eye at that time.
Yes, but acutely aware of 40 years ago. All of a
sudden. But it was really fun, and always being on this leading edge of the combination of technology and developing the concepts. Today, our industry combines people, place, and technology, sprinkles in the concept of community, and delivers the entire bundled package with a highly flexible service agreement. And if you look at what all businesses need today, it'd be easy to say all businesses need clients, all businesses need access to capital, growth, and sustenance, and all businesses need flexibility because of the various economic cycles that we go through year after year, decade after decade. And so by bringing flexibility to the workplace very early on and combining it with the things that in a bundled package that all businesses have to have, but most small business in particular aren't prepared to manage people, as a good example. Mm-hmm. I don't see any clerical, secretarial, administrative support sitting around you guys.
No. No.
Okay. It's painful. It's painful. Yeah. Hiring, firing, interviewing, maintaining, worrying about sick leave, vacations, benefits. These things take a lot away from the entrepreneurs to focus on their core business.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, to that point, like right now we're in the process of trying to hire like a personal assistant, executive assistant for my ad agency. And the amount of time and resources I'm having to spend just trying to find the right candidate versus, what I should be doing, in terms of business, new business or whatever. It's amazing. And, I mean, we're just a smallish firm, so we don't do a ton of hiring. And so we're not like pros at it. It's a little here, a little there.
Let's use this as a segue over to virtual officing and flexibility for a second. Let's assume that you guys were going to start your company and you needed to go to a VC and raise $1 million. And I was going to start my company and I needed to go to a VC and raise $1 million. And when I walked in, I said to the VC, hey, I need $1 million. I'm going to do this amazing stuff. And you say, well, what are you going to do with that $1 million? I'd say, well, I'm going to go out and get an office. I'm going to hire a PA and I've got to buy some photocopy imaging equipment. And I need a phone system and I've got to put in a computer network, blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on and on. So he looked at me and he says, okay. And then I said, after that, I'm going to hire some engineers and build some cool stuff. And you walk in, the same VC, and say, hey, we're starting this really great marketing company. We need $1 million. He says, what are you going to do? He says, well, I'm going to move into a co-working center and hire some engineers. Who's going to get the money, you or me?
Yeah, right. It sure seems like the safer bet to go with the.
Yeah, you're going to get the money. One of our primary groups that we interact with are venture capitalists, seed investors, et cetera, that come to us to help house and host, almost in an incubator or accelerator type capacity, the companies that they invest in. because the business model gives flexibility, reduces cost, reduces capex, and also allows the entrepreneur to focus on their core business model.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, they're not caught up in building out a space or any of this other stuff, and the amount of money that goes into doing all that work.
Right, exactly.
They're down to brass tacks. They're getting right to it.
Can we talk about your business model a little bit? I kind of like it because you're kind of going away from the brick and mortar and owning the business instead of owning the actual real estate. You kind of own the customer, kind of like I think you called it like the Marriott or the who else does that?
Well, I think if you were to look at the hospitality industry, that a company like Regis in our industry is a good example, would be very much like Marriott. They own or lease their facilities, manage their facilities, and they service the companies from the facilities. Our company really is more like Expedia. We own the customer and service the customer and host and house the customer in all variety, whether it's Marriott or Hilton or any other hospitality provider. We do it with offices and office buildings and virtual office complexes, business centers, co-working centers, etc. Meeting and conference room reservations and booking systems. So we've migrated over our 40-year history now from property company, and we sold that portfolio after about 10 years, to an operating company very similar to Regis, which we had for about 10 or 12 years, to now we're a business services and technology company that not only services the customer, but also services the industry at large. So we have booking and reservations and management systems that hundreds of operators in 54 countries use today. We have the industry's largest news and information networking system. Our social reach last month was over 950,000. So
that's incredible.
We're pretty big in that regard. We manage the industry's largest charitable foundation, which we established on behalf of the industry. We even manage a coffee company that serves coffee to our industry across North America, where all of the profits go to charity. So we're very much industry activists.
That's neat.
As well as operating company.
So say I'm Joe Schmo and I want to go and rent a virtual office from you. What's the process? I just go to your website and
you can open 10 offices in 10 cities in 10 countries in 10 minutes. It's that simple. Think of booking a hotel room on Expedia or you go in, you say, that's a hotel I want to stay at. That's a city I want to be in. I want a deluxe room. Book it.
Cool.
Is that simple? And once you're set in, then we follow up with additional items you might need, whether you need a landline telephony system tied to that, whether you're going to want to set up a network of offices or possibly a network of meeting rooms around the office you've established. Really, whatever it is that you require in order to make your business successful. We have not just the technology, but very concierge level service departments and to support the customers that utilize our virtual officing.
So let's go on the other hand. Say I own a co-working company and I want to get listed on your network. Do you have a vetting process that you go through?
Yes, we do. And it's really based on the simple concept that there's any variety of facilities, but there should only be one standard of service. And I'll give you a kind of an extreme example. If you have a 5-star facility in London, it's going to be pretty nice. If you have a 5-star facility in India, it's going to be really nice too. But there might be a cow walk through the lobby.
Right.
Okay, because cows are sacred.
Yeah.
Okay, so the fact that you have a variety of facilities to service all needs in all markets. Not every market's a 5-star market, even in major places like London. You have a lot of 4 and 3-star markets and a lot of 4 and 3-star budgets. So we try and create a bandwidth of facilities, but through the vetting process insist that we only have facilities with 5-star service and support. So we don't have the biggest potential network in the world, but we do have the
not
best.
Everybody is welcome,
and we want to maintain that quality, because people are depending upon that to build their business, and that means their families are depending upon it. So you don't want to be shabby about this stuff.
So what are the type of things you're looking for in a 5-star facility? High-speed internet,
bandwidth, of course, and the dependability of it, and the proper management of it. You guys, you've got a bunch of video stuff going right now. I imagine you transfer a bunch of video files back and forth. You're kind of bandwidth hogs.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Okay. So if we have a free and in common bandwidth system in a center where everybody's just sharing it, almost no matter how big the pipe is that I put in there, you're going to dominate it. And the poor attorney next door isn't be able to get his email. Okay, so we have to, it's not just having bandwidth, it's how you manage the bandwidth systems relative to the individual users. You do that down to the individual IP addresses or the individual ports in the individual offices or workstations. So you have to not just have a big pipe. You've got to manage it well. So we look for people that are using good management operating systems, people that have good public areas. The most important thing you're going to do, aside from this amazing interview with me, is have a meeting. So we want to make sure that the meeting facilities are good, and that the AV facilities are good in the meeting rooms, and that the guests that come in have access to that bandwidth too, and how the guests are treated. Because we're not here necessarily just to make you happy, but we're here to make your customers happy.
How important are aesthetics to you? Do you think the spit polish and then just the extra steps are important, or is it more just functionality in your opinion?
Cleanliness is the most important part of spit polish, so to speak, when it comes to aesthetic standards. You can have a very simple center design-wise, just like a very simple restaurant design-wise. But if it's spotless clean and the service is good, then you're going to be happy there. You saw it when you bought it, you know what you were paying for, and it's spotless clean. If you go into a really cool center that's great design, and imagine this and that, but the receptionist is kind of surly and the restroom's dirty, I don't care what the design is or how much it costs. It's not good. It's just not good. So your spit and polish isn't about the most expensive materials, but it's really about the care, the customer care, and that starts with smiles and cleanliness, really.
Makes sense. Well, hey, let's take kind of a half step back. And so as we've sort of discovered through this conversation, we noticed that you guys, your consortium of yourself and other entrepreneurs that you're surrounded by, were really on the cutting edge and a little bit ahead, or the bleeding edge, as we talked about, on sort of this whole co-working movement for people. And it seems funny to us because so our podcast studio is actually located inside a co-working space, who we partnered with to build out the studio. And I personally, in my business, forewent having a brick and mortar office when we moved to Utah 6 years ago, and now work exclusively out of different co-working spaces. Mm-hmm. So I'm really, really familiar to this. And I just got back from Los Angeles last week, and I work out of one downtown, and same kind of thing. I use these spaces all over the place. And but I wonder if you could talk a little bit. It seems so funny that people wouldn't have a good understanding of it already. But can we talk about sort of the future of business? We talked about in trying to get venture capital, why people might choose co-working or an option like using Alliance to make that choice. But could we talk a little bit about sort of the future of business and how you think that maybe brick and mortar is going to start sloughing off and people might start to embrace co-working more and more, for reasons we've discussed and others?
Well, I think first we'll define the industry a little bit and then move it forward. As I said a minute earlier, our industry consists of all providers that combine people, place, and technology, and add community as a concept to that on a highly flexible service agreement, and they're all bundled together. So that's the first step. And within our industry, there are different brands or models, you could say. There's a classic business center brand. We mentioned Regis a minute ago. They have a brand promise of professional image and services. Co-working centers, such as you're in today, probably has a brand promise that says, for you, business growth through a collaborative community, combined with that people, place, and technology.
Mm-hmm.
An incubator adds mentoring to either a business or a co-working center. An accelerator adds access to capital to an incubator. Today, we're seeing logistics centers, media centers, culinary centers, all variety of structures around this people, place, technology, community concept. So that's what our industry is. And the migration of that today is being fed, the tremendous growth of our industry is being fed by the migration and changes in hiring and employment structures globally, which are driven a lot by technology and mobility in technology. I mentioned when we first started out, we used big digital switches, mini computers, all tied to cables. Today, you have more power in your smartphone than we had back then.
Yeah, isn't it crazy?
So mobility is tremendous. In fact, there's 1.8, as of the end of last year, there's 1.8 billion mobile workers globally. And that's defined by people that work away from their core office permanently 2 or more days a week. So the migration is huge there. The other migration that's huge is contracting. If you were to take your favorite big company, you mentioned Oracle, so let's go with Oracle. Oracle, 5 or 10 years ago, put out their annual report, and they said we made a whole bunch of revenue, made a whole bunch of profit. We had 500,000 employees worldwide. Okay. Today, when you see the same annual report, they'd say, well, we made a whole bunch of revenue and a whole bunch of profit. We have a workforce of 500,000. So because of those 500,000 people, a third of them are now contractors. Yeah. And so the big migration isn't just to contracting, but it's to the alignment in business between your workforce and your balance sheet. And that comes as a result of changing your fixed asset models. So if you have a workforce of 500,000 today, with a third of them as contractors on 1 to 3 year contracts, you don't want to have 10-year, 15, 20-year leases on 30% of your space. You now want to have 1 to 3 year service agreements that match your employment model so that the negative liabilities of those long-term leases, which are really debt instruments, can drop off your balance sheet and impact the share value of your company.
Interesting.
And when you say, well, how many people does that mean? Oh, just how many people does a global Fortune 1000 employ? Staggering. Yeah. Okay. Let's take a third of them and move them into our industry tomorrow. Yeah. Okay. I'm excited about that one. But that's what's happening all over the world. Then you go with the other thing right now. What was in the news here in the U.S. today? That our Congress is not going to shut down because they're going to agree on some budget issues. Okay. So isn't that wonderful? But what budget for government is a 1-year thing. And yet buildings and leases for government averages around 12 to 15 years. So if government can get to our model, which they're migrating to every way they can, of having their lease liabilities match their budget structures, that's really have a huge impact on our national debt. So there's all these things that interrelate. It's not as simple as co-working is cool and I've got a better beard than you, and who cares? What matters is the underlying structure of the economics that are driving it, and it's flexibility in the workplace required to change the balance sheets of companies to enhance the shareholder value. All these mega trends combined with technology, and then by 2022, 23, technology is going to change everything on its ear again and completely repurpose probably a third of all commercial real estate in the world.
That's great.
And we just see this happening, and it's happening as a result of issues around Gen Z that we see coming up, and some of the major technology companies that are actually in the gaming industry.
The VR world.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have some people in the same building that are working on some VR projects. It's pretty neat. I know nothing about it, but just putting the goggles on and actually experiencing the VR experience I can see where it's going.
Well,
something big.
We believe that we are a technology-based company today, a software as a service style company, but we think that the co-working center that you're in by 2022, 23 one of their core products will not just be bandwidth, but they'll be selling a full interactive virtual reality software that allows you to create the office you want where you are inside of the facility.
That's crazy.
What that does is it dramatically changes the value of real estate. So as an example, let's assume that I have a big 1,000-foot personal office in the top of a high-rise building in Manhattan, nice big corner office overlooking Central Park. Well, that's a very expensive office. That's a $20,000 a month office for me. Okay. But by 2022, 23, I'll be able to slip on a headset, be in the Bronx, dial in the software for the coolest office in Manhattan, pay $50 a month for that software, and be sitting at a 48-inch cube and not know the difference. So what's that going to do to the value of the office overlooking the park in Manhattan? It's going to change it. And that change in the value due to technology, which will all be driven by Gen Z, who's used to gaming with headsets, and all the gaming companies that are trying to extend the time life cycle of their customers that are growing up away from games to other products that will take advantage of the same rendering technologies they use in gaming. So all of this is occurring right now. And so as you go into the cities, the change of commercial space, the value of commercial space will change radically, which means you'll have more mixed use in these buildings. So the ability to increase housing and lower housing costs, and also have higher density, which will reduce transportation issues, et cetera.
That's crazy.
Yeah, interesting. Hey, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, so you mentioned, basically you guys had invested in a bunch of property, sold off that portfolio, and then began developing this version or this iteration of the co-working, where now you're more of a SaaS company. All I hear from a lot of people anyway is that, real estate investment is the thing and everybody needs to be owning property, but it sounds like you purposefully took a step out of that world. And I guess, the overhead's much higher and things like that. Like I can think of net pros versus cons of doing that. But I wondered if you would talk a little bit about that move. Like, how come you decided it was, more valuable and more profitable and more whatever to do business in the way you're doing it, where you're a broker for other people's spaces versus owning them yourselves?
Well, we're not a broker. Number one, we're a wholesaler, and there's a big difference. Yeah, we own the customer. We actually, on a wholesale basis, are the customer to the business or co-working center, and we own the customer on our end. And so that's a major difference.
Yeah, that is. I'm sorry about
that. And yeah, please correct yourself. But originally we were operators, and when we owned the property, we liked the business model. But it's a very capital intensive model to build out if you're going to scale large. So when that portfolio was sold, we became an operator and did just what Regis and HQ and WeWork now is doing and other companies are doing. We leased space from landlords and chopped it up into our model. Maybe that's the model of the co-working center you're in, and then relet it to our clients with in our business service model. After a while, you start to look at your own balance sheet and you say, this is not as expensive as building the buildings, and we're growing a lot faster, but we still, every time we sign a lease, that's a 10-year debt instrument. So the balance sheet of the company gets worse and worse and worse the larger you get. And that holds the value of the company back overall. And I decided that at a point that the business model wasn't as efficient as owning the customer. And I'll use Regis as a good example. Regis is a great company. They're a major competitor of ours, have been for years. And the owner's a great guy, by the way. We're good friends, even though we're competitors. Their business model, the value of that company, though, is being held back by the negativity of their balance sheet. WeWork is worth much more than Regis today because they've convinced the market that their balance sheet doesn't matter because they're really a tech company in disguise. Whether that's true or not, we'll wait and see. I think that they're kind of inflating the value quite a bit, but still, that's their story and they're sticking to it. So different business models all have different valuations. Software today has about the best valuation for every dollar of revenue and certainly dollar of profit of anything out there. So we shifted not because real estate is bad. The ownership of real estate is wonderful, but the leasing of real estate is bad. And it's bad because of cyclicality. Right now, since you guys have been pushing your careers, you've been on one half of one economic cycle. You basically from 06 forward, it's been down a little bit, 06, 08, and then slowly creeping up and then growing nicely. You haven't been on a big downward slam the other way yet. And when that happens, all the people that have taken leases at the height of the market, WeWork as an example, are going to find that the market drops 20%. Now their leases are way overpriced. I think they're overpriced anyway, but way, way overpriced. Mm-hmm. And then somebody comes in at that lower price, leases a space across the street from them, has a lower basis in operating costs, and puts them out of business.
That's crazy.
So yeah, that is real estate is good when you own it. It's not necessarily good when you rent it.
That makes sense. So in terms of like trying to scale and take your operation larger, that would have been hinging on you guys generating enough income to buy another building and things like that. And that just maybe doesn't scale as quickly as the
Well, it's very capital intensive. And again, we felt that I'll use the valuations in our industry. A classic small co-working company is worth, if they want to sell the company, if it's got 7 years remaining on its lease so it can sustain itself in business, it's worth 3.5 to 5 times its EBITDA. It's earnings before taxes, interest, and depreciation. 3.5 to 5 times. And that's for trailing EBITDA, 12-month trailing EBITDA. A software company, a SaaS company, is worth any place between 10 to 22 times its 12 months forecasted revenues. Which business do you want to be in?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, of course. And I mean, I'm just even thinking of the practical matters, right? I believe you said you guys are in 54 countries. I mean, trying to own and operate and maintain and build and renovate and update property across the planet like that, probably not super practical.
It takes, well, you look at the amount of money that WeWork is spending to try and get there. And WeWork today is about 15 to 20% the size of Regis. And they've already spent about $8 billion trying to get there. And they're about 20% the size of Regis.
Wow, that's insane. So I guess that makes sense. So almost like, even though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like maybe now, almost like your father's business, maybe because as a wholesaler, you're taking a little less money per client, maybe because now you're having to split it with whomever you're wholesaling to, but you're doing much more business and you don't have all the overhead that these other companies do, the WeWorks of the world.
Well, yes, and on the one hand, we can go anywhere we want. If Regis or WeWork wants to service another couple of hundred clients, they need to spend couple of $1 million to CapEx, build it out a center, and then sign a 10-year lease. If I want to service a couple of hundred more clients, I have to pay Google about, I don't know, $5 a click, and it takes me about $350 to gain a client and through the internet. So from a investment of capital and balance sheet perspective, actually our business is much more profitable per customer than the classic model. Much more profitable for customer, in particular because we also own our own call centers. Okay. So we own our own phone company, so to speak, behind our system, which means that That's for us, that's a 65% margin business. And our core business blended is a 46% margin business globally.
Wow.
If you look at WeWork is a negative 100% business right now because they're losing billions of dollars a year. Regis, who's very well established, is about a 10 or 12% margin business globally.
Well, and as we talked about, I mean, by the time you work in all this overhead, everything else that we've discussed, I mean, it makes perfect sense. So, I mean, it's pretty smart that you guys have managed to, continue to see sort of the forward trend or what's to come.
Well, and I think for us too, our next generation of our company, we just are shape shifting a little bit to where we're becoming a capital management investment company. We are now investing as much, if not more, in other companies that we're acquiring or investing in that are service our industry or are around our industry as we are investing in our own core companies. In fact, much more externally than internally now. We feel that one of the best ways to help the industry to grow is to strengthen the technology infrastructure that the industry uses and that the large corporate clients and government use to interface with our industry. Today, there's no such thing, in my view at least, as an office occupier. That used to be the term, the occupiers. Today, everybody, and you just mentioned it from your own experience, you're using a co-working center in LA, you're using a co-working center here and there around town. Today, to us, everybody is a traveler, not an occupier. It's just how long you're staying at that particular desk and then moving to a different desk. And then
or that particular Starbucks or the next one.
Hopefully not Starbucks.
Well,
Starbucks.
That's where
it has a lack of security.
Yes.
Well,
a lack of security that's terrifying if you understand it.
Well, I came from the habitual work at Starbucks for 5 hours a day and moved to another.
That's why I have all your secret files.
Right. Right. But it's so much better to have, the ability to come in and have an office and have, the conference room and the high-speed internet and the coffee shop around the corner still there if I want my coffee, but I don't have to.
Hopefully the co-working center you're using is providing all good coffee from our nonprofit.
We actually might want to talk to you about that on another.
No, coffee shops are great places to meet up to somebody, to have a cup of coffee, and then go ride your bikes together. But they're very poor places to do business. They might be okay for a student to camp for a little bit, but complete lack of privacy, total disruption, problems truly around security for your internet usage, as well as internal bandwidth hacking and radio hacking and stuff. It's a pretty scary place if you understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think a lot of people probably don't understand all that. So I think that's a key thing to understand. I think also, I mean, like for me, like I say, we have kind of a small company. We have an office here in Salt Lake. Well, our virtual office as we run around Salt Lake City. And then we also have our virtual office in Barcelona. And so we have a small team over there and then a small team over here in the States. And the amenities and all that stuff, like I said, I had brick and mortar before relocating down to Utah. And the amount of money that I save in not paying a lease every month, and relative to the amount of amenities and just the quality of the materials and everything in the place that I'm at, has elevated the office I can afford or that I can, run our business out of. And it gives us a little bit of that, curb appeal, when people come into the office and we have this beautifully designed conference space that we can work in and stuff. I mean, it's much better than the sleazy old back room I had at my old office in Idaho.
Well, and not only that, you have that office in Idaho and you probably had a meeting room in it and maybe a little reception spot and all that. How often was that stuff used?
Yeah, almost never.
But you were paying for it 24/7, 365. And
you're paying for it.
Right now, you're
paying for the power. You're paying for all the other stuff too.
You have an on-demand office, And that's really where the whole concept of executive suite started back in the 70s. It was really following the intermodal model of just-in-time inventory, saying, hey, I need just-in-time office space. We started that concept back in the late 90s, and our own just-in-time concept in the late 90s, but it was the predecessor for it was in the 70s, and it was the same thing on demand.
And technology has facilitated making it much easier now. So even if you have on-demand fact that I can just pull it up on an app now, a room for that type of business, because I mean it's like Uber, right? Everything is just at the palm of your hand.
Yep.
And so that makes
that's right.
And like we run into, or like one of the things I really like, one of the co-workings that we work here have multiple locations, not unlike a WeWork or whatever. These guys are local, but they have a shop here in Salt Lake City, and then they have a shop just south in a town called Lehigh, which is where Adobe is building their second and third campuses, and Oracle is, and all the startup culture down there. So as a marketer and a guy that works in digital marketing, advertising, design, all that stuff, we surround ourselves with these startups. And so that gives us me the opportunity to not only be in downtown Salt Lake, which is, prime space where you want to be if you're working in Salt Lake City, but I can also zip down to Lehigh and get full exposure to all the startups and all these budding companies and things that are coming up. And I get exposure to that community strictly because of the co-working. If I just had my own brick and mortar somewhere, I wouldn't meet anybody.
And you'd only be talking to yourself too. Yeah. And that's a nice thing about a business center or co-working center. Any of the new shared office models is, it's nice to have interaction with others, and not just have our little team of 3 people coming to our little office every day. I don't care how nice it is; it gets boring.
Well, it's true. Well, and in my world, like I really benefit from conversation and from, just hearing other people's ideas and spitballing back and forth, and, ideas will grow, and, you can start to tap into other people's abilities and skills and work with one another on different things. And I mean, it just expedites the whole process of developing a business.
Well, that
couldn't happen without that,
That brings us full circle to where the conversation started about balance. You have better balance when you're interacting with others. Not when you're isolated on your own. So that's just a good thing to consider about the whole community concept.
Well, one thing that I picked up on another podcast that I was listening to, you just kind of doing some research. You said one of your friends does this thing called what is it? It's a lunch with a stranger.
Lunch with a stranger, yeah.
You were saying that you don't like going to networking events, but you like meeting and having coffee with people.
When you walk into the classic old Chamber of Commerce wine and cheese networking mixer, you went over to talk to your 3 or 4 friends. You all stood around in a little circle and talked to each other, and then maybe they introduced you to somebody else. But it was really kind of a little groups of cliques hanging out together. And it was the same old people, the same old time, saying the same old things. And so I'm not a big fan of that. I like one-on-one or small group meetings where you have a purpose. Hey, I'm here to talk about this, and everybody knows it, and vice versa, to where you can explore ideas and explore things very quickly and easily, and then have kind of a real friend, not a Facebook friend.
Yeah, right.
And it just expands your relationship.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I've been to a number of these different mingling and mixers and social nights and all this stuff, and you always find the one guy that's just running around and giving everyone their business card indiscriminately, but they don't know you, they don't have any real interest, they just want to grab everybody. It's like, so that seems to me like the type of people you get at those networking events. It's hurry up and get exposed to as many people as you can, as quickly as you can.
And how many of them actually call you?
Yeah, well, and there's just no depth to the relationship. It's this very transactional, hi, I'm so-and-so, here's my business card, on to the next one. Where like what you're describing, this lunch with a stranger, and I have a little experience I should talk about around that, gives you an opportunity to kind of dive deep and get to know a person and understand what they're trying to do. And, I think that, in our company, relationships are really key. And actually, last year, in the middle of the year, our company experienced kind of a big hiccup where we found ourselves with a shortage of clients, and our portfolio of people had just kind of withered over time and wasn't growing quickly anymore. And I got on LinkedIn and I just started hitting up every random ad agency owner and CEO in the tech space and anybody I could get. And, I had surprisingly good results, but I had a few people who did the same kind of thing where, one day a week they met with a random stranger about whatever they're doing. And of all the people that I met doing that, including CEOs and CMOs of some huge companies, really great companies, I've developed relationships now. We have friendships. I can call them or ping them, hey, I've got this concern. I'm trying to solve this problem, whatever it is. And because we did this one-on-one and, it cost me a bowl of ramen or something, it was like $20. And now I've got this advisor that's invaluable to me. And, so I really like that idea of this sort of lunch with a stranger, or, at least having a specific reason for meeting the person you're trying to meet.
Well, come down to Newport Beach and I promise to buy you a better lunch than ramen.
Well, you know how it goes. They've got this fancy ramen now, right?
But I can beat the ramen.
Get it for 11 cents over it.
I could beat the ramen.
Yeah, unfortunately, with such short notice, I was just in Santa Ana on Friday. And so I was not far from you.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I have clients there near the island, whatever they call that mall there in Newport.
Fashion Island?
Yeah.
And
so right on the Arbor Edge there.
That's actually where my offices are.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's only a couple big buildings around that perimeter. I wonder if you're one of them.
No, we're down on the low-rise buildings down on PCH, right at the edge of PCH.
Oh, how cool. How funny. So anyway, yes, next time I come around.
You'll give me a call. I'm not a big fan of elevators. They take time and they're always on the wrong floor. So I like garden-style offices where I can drive up, walk in, and I'm done.
There you go.
Well, nothing wrong with that, and especially if you're in Newport. It's nice to be able to walk down and get out into the weather.
And the ocean view doesn't hurt either. But talking about lunch with a friend issue, one of the smaller co-working centers that we dealt with a long time ago had a good practice. Every time a new member would join the center, they would walk the member around, even in the initial tour process, and introduce them to people. And then the receptionist of the center's primary job was to make sure every day that the members had lunch together somehow. And so she was pretty good at it. And even inside of the restroom, as you'd leave the restroom, there's a little sign on there that says, "Who are you having lunch with today?"
I love that.
Yeah, that's
really simple. Yeah. But it kept everybody attuned to that. And then the receptionist would say, as you walked out the door, "Hey, George and Harry just went down the street to the cafe. Why don't you join them?"
That's great.
The littlest thing.
Well, especially
it brought the group together
the sense of community,
closer relationship.
Yeah, I love this.
Quite nice.
Well, yeah, and I can't speak for everybody, of course, but for a lot of people like me and in the tech space and places like that, we're not all wild extroverts. We're not dying to run out and meet people.
Right.
We know we need to as a function of business or whatever, but it might not be, at least in my case, until recent years. It definitely wasn't my first inclination. I would have much rather been the guy just dropping emails all day and call it good. It wasn't really until I started meeting more people and getting out and making more of these relationships that it's become easier for me. But it certainly wasn't my natural inclination. So, but to your point, one of the co-working spaces I work out of does something similar, and maybe I'll just name drop them. They're called Kiln here in Salt Lake. They're kind of a locally owned, operated kind of thing, but they do this thing through their Slack channel, and I don't know if this is a software or something. But it's called what is it? Like Drinks and Donuts or something like that, and it's the same kind of premise, but each week you're automatically put in touch with somebody. And, the idea is that you guys will meet for coffee or whatever. So, speaking of your coffee business, all these shops are tied up around coffee. And so they basically, automatically just assign you somebody, and then between the two of you, you set up a time to meet. And I've only done this twice now since starting at this space. But the first one, I became a member of their advisory board on their startup based on the lunch that we had together. And I've got another one this week with a developer from a startup over here. So it'll be kind of an interesting thing. But I love that premise or that idea. And it's, building community, but it's also forcing those who might not otherwise go looking for it. Well, and so I love that bit.
Yeah, the concept of breaking bread is timeless.
Yeah.
Sitting down and having a meal with someone and sharing together is a timeless act and process. So, but it usually has a sense of intimacy to it. Going to a banquet is not the same as having a private meal.
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, we have an office over in Barcelona, and I don't know if you're real familiar with the area or anything, but they the Spanish culture totally hinges on that personal relationship. I mean, a lot of the clients we've been fortunate enough to start work with, or are still working on. I mean, we've been having conversations for 3-4 years, just trying to kind of ingratiate ourselves with them, because you're competing with their cousin or their friend or their whatever, and so as an outsider to come in, you've really got to do that relationship, and maybe they're just taking advantage of me for the free beers, but it's always
yes, they are absolutely. But I
really enjoy it.
In Spain, that's particularly important on a regional basis, and Catalonia even more so than the rest of Spain. I'm very familiar with Spain. I spent lots of time there.
Yeah, and that was one of the big, I guess, eye openers for us, because prior to doing business in Spain, and I won't get into the whole story, but prior to doing business in Spain, I was really solopreneur, eyes down, working behind my computer as a designer mostly, and just doing that kind of work all day by myself in the office, like no social life, no anything. Through a series of events, we ended up finding a partner in Barcelona and took the business over there. And on my first trip to Barcelona, it opened my eyes to this whole other way of living, this idea of developing friendships and developing relationships, and, being, allowing yourself to be intimate with people like that, and I think that for me, it was a big game changer. It changed the whole way we run the company, and really, I mean, we put so much value on the relationships almost above anything else.
Well,
and, but that was sort of born in Spain.
Yeah. Particularly when you cross borders, you learn very quickly that contracts do not solve problems. Only relationships solve problems.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of work in the Middle East and Russia and places like that, where the guy who owns a country is who you're contracting with, so the contract's no good.
Right.
Because all he has to do is say, "Oh, we changed the law," and or I'm the minister of this, and so we're not doing it. So your contract never saves you in business, and you shouldn't depend upon it to save you. You're going to have challenges in business. You're going to have problems. Every issue is always going to have a problem, and it's your problem solving that's important. And a big percentage of that is around the relationships and the trust.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think trust right there is the key. I mean, honestly, the developing of those relationships, and what I like about it so much, and as a kid, I mean, I'm on the cusp, where half of my life I had the internet and half of it I didn't, and so I'm at least kind of on the cusp. I'm not like these kids that have only grown up on the internet, but I really find value in things like that seem a little bit old fashioned, like, I mean, nowadays, and even the way I started my business in the early days, we did everything online. There were years I never met clients, even, people that I just strictly worked with on the internet because the internet facilitated that. And now, as I've matured and the business has matured and the type of clients we're getting are better, the relationship thing has come back into it. And I'm really finding that the sort of the quaintness of that hand-to-hand, relationship, the handshake and the sitting down and breaking bread or whatever is, it makes everything more enjoyable. It's more meaningful. And even though it could all be facilitated online or by voice chat or whatever, there's something totally different and magical about taking the moment, to actually spend with a person.
No, it is. It's very, very important, and it helps you grow as much as them always.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even to your earlier point about just being surrounded by all these amazing people in the yachting business early on in your career, how influential those people were in your life, being surrounded by all these successful people who could sort of help guide your ship a little bit to stay in the yachting world.
No, and that was I was very fortunate in that regard. That good team, good people, and having fun at the same time.
Yeah,
awesome. Doing what I loved. So that was great.
Well, Frank, before we get out of here, are there any books you're reading right now, or anything that we should kind of do some research on?
No, I'm more of a news freak than reading somebody else's ideas about what they did 3 years ago that made them successful. I don't necessarily think it applies to today. So I'm very much a current events and a news freak. I think that the one piece of guidance I would throw out in that general regard, though, is that when people ask me about our industry or ask me about things, and you've done this, you've done that, and my position and my consideration of myself is, and my goal every day is to simply be the best student of our industry, and to spend every day an hour or two specifically in study, reading, learning, calling someone and asking, exploring, and not looking down at my computer, but looking out at the world every day, and make that a discipline. So I don't know that a particular book or a particular following a particular news group or this or that is so important as the concept of what can I do today to learn about my industry and to be an expert at your industry, not just. I read this really cool book about this guy that was in the automotive industry, and he redesigned this, and he has these great theories. Well, are you in the automotive industry? No.
Nope. Right.
Okay, well, good for you. Now let's read about your industry. So really be a good student of your own industry and become an expert.
Yeah, I think that's a nice twist on it. I think right now there seems to be a lot of people who are kind of grasping at straws or trying to glom off of the experience of those who have found success and things like that, rather than just going out and doing themselves. They sort of get caught up, and I do this myself sometimes, get kind of caught up in the how did he become rich, or how did he get to wherever? And I want that for myself, but all I can do is read his book, when really what I ought to be doing is working, or like you're saying, study your business, study your industry. And I like that idea, the concept of becoming a student. I think that's wise.
One thing that's key too is actually knowing what you want to do and having a goal and working in that direction versus jumping around and not knowing what you're working on. So
also, I think the first obligation or the first step in being a leader is simply to lead.
True.
It's simply to do it. The second most important step is to look back over your shoulder and make sure there's people following. But you can lead in the wrong direction sometimes.
You got a conga line of one.
Yeah,
it's a great conga.
Let me tell you, and I've seen that video, and it's incredible. No, it really things people. This is my own opinion. Make things way too complicated. Life is pretty simple. You get up, you do what you want to do all day long. Hopefully, well, my dad explained it to me. We were talking a long time ago when I was a kid, and he was explaining life to me. I'm about 16 years old, and he says, and life is like when everybody was a caveman. During the day, you went out, you hunted, and you killed a mastodon or two, and maybe you picked some berries, and you brought the stuff back. He said, but at night, when you sat around the fire and you sung, and you put art on the walls of the cave, that's life.
Yeah.
So it's that balance that's important.
Some of my fondest memories are dropping a crab pot in the Puget Sound and having a few beers with friends. And you can't relive those moments if if you haven't experienced that and had that kind of relationship with people, you don't know what you're missing.
And I think
it's all about.
Yeah, and just to kind of put that point to bed, I think the idea of being the leader and actually being the one who's helping to steer the industry, much like it sounds like you've been able to accomplish in your businesses, really just goes to that point of just get out there and lead and stop looking for the answers everywhere else. Find your way. And I think that's a really good place to leave this conversation. So.
Yep, I agree for two reasons. I have an appointment so I've got to get to.
All right, perfect.
It's one of those non-ramen lunches, as a matter of fact.
Oh, nice.
All right. Well, then let's wrap this up quick. Basically, you can learn more about Frank Cottle at alliancevirtualoffices.com. You can follow him on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Frank Cottle, Alliance Virtual on Facebook and Twitter. And of course, we'll publish all those notes on the show here. So thanks so much for your time, Frank. Really appreciate you. I am going to take you up on that lunch next time in California, so be ready for that.
I'm ready for that anytime. Anytime.
All right, sounds
you might
good.
have a stranger tagging along with you.
Yeah, be careful.
Well, I've heard that there are strangers that tag along with them often.
It's true, but it's that conga line. I'm working on the conga line. So cool. Well, thanks so much, Frank. Have a great day, and we'll talk to everybody. Thanks for tuning in on the live stream and everything, and we'll see everybody next week.
Perfect. Take care.
All right. Take care, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.